Good morning, everyone. How you doing? Today, we're going to be talking about giants, and a lot of them. A lot of giants today. We're going to go through a bunch of scripture verses. Some of these verses you might be surprised. You might be like, oh, that's interesting. I never knew that there were that many giants in the Bible. So we're going to be talking about that. I just wanted to say good morning to everyone. You guys had a good night. Good night's sleep. Hope you were able to watch the show last night. We did a show on fires in California, whether or not this was a black swan event or this is a black swan event. So I talked about that last night. And I watched some more footage. My goodness. It feels like Armageddon. It feels like a judgment on the state of California. Mostly because it's fire. Mostly. You know, like if it was just wind and houses falling over, you'd probably still kind of lean on that way. That something's up. Something's up. I'm kind of torn between the idea that man did something to start this, or finish it perhaps, because it's like total obliteration of buildings. Like when you look at them, it looks like a bomb was dropped right over California. It's so bizarre. It's really bizarre, really strange. I'm not saying that man started it, but we know there's insurance fraud. We know that. We know that goes on. So we're going to be not talking about that this morning. Excuse me. There's my one sneeze of the day. All right, so we're going to dive into this. Let's just jump in here. Let's jump into some scripture verse. Sneezing this morning. All right. Let's jump in. Let's jump into Genesis chapter 6. Let's have a look here. What's going on here? And let's just make this full screen. There we go. All right. Let's read Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and took them all wives, of which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. That's interesting. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. All right, we're going to come back to some scriptures, but my wife was so kind to bring me some Kleenex. It's funny. For 12 days, I've been on this cleansing diet, this detox, if you will, and I never had cream in my coffee for 12 days. And the morning that I have cream, just a little bit, just a little smidge, I get a little bit of phlegm. It's interesting, right? I probably have an allergy to dairy. The only way to figure that stuff out is if you take away some of the foods that you really, really like. Pizza, milkshakes, ice cream, chocolate bars, all that stuff. You take all that stuff away for 12 days, and then you add something like a little bit of cream, and you're like, okay, yeah, definitely allergic to that, and you just get rid of it. Add something else, like I haven't had bread in 12 days. I feel great. I feel fantastic. It's kind of interesting, right? So since Christmas time, I was topping the scales at 260 pounds, if you can believe that. 260. Who does that? Who does that? I really let myself go at Christmas time. I love chocolate at Christmas time. I love me some cake, ice cream, all kinds of stuff, cookies. Love it. Love it. Love it. But since then, I am as of this morning, I am 247. So what is that? That's 13 pounds I've lost since Christmas time. And I feel good. And we have a corporate fast coming up on Monday for 3 days with our church. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll just kind of tidy things up into a nice bow, not eating for 3 days. That'll be good. Last year when I did the corporate fast, I got sick the week before. Like from Monday to Friday, I was just like, oh man, I'm not feeling good. I was working. I never missed a day at work because I was driving a truck. And I just kept to myself. But I was just like, if this was the day to take off and go home and sleep, because I was not feeling good. But I had so much work to do that I just kept doing it. And I never ate for 5 days. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, man, Monday's coming up, and I really wanted to do the corporate fast with the church. So I never ate all weekend, and then I never ate during those 3 days. So for 10 days, I never had anything. And I felt great at the end of Wednesday. At the end of 10 days, I was almost sad to go back to eating. I lost 30 pounds. 30 pounds in 10 days. Like, it fell off of me. That tells you how much of a chunky monkey I am. My diet was not very good last year. So my plan is to clean everything up and then introduce a couple of things here and there. And then just moderate and exercise and all this kind of stuff. But I feel, like I said, I feel pretty good right now. I have no aches, no pains. I sleep through the night. As soon as I go down to go to sleep, out cold. And then I wake up at usually go to bed between 10, 11 o'clock kind of thing. And then I get up at 6 o'clock, go downstairs, have my devotion, make my coffee, and then I come over here. It's kind of the routine. So, all right, let's continue. So we have an issue going on in Genesis 6. That is, the sons of God come down to know the daughters of men, to take the daughters of men for them to be wives, like literally marrying women on earth, taking them, meaning there's no choice. The only choice for men is to give them their daughters so that they don't harm them. That's the condition. We will give you our daughters. Please don't harm us. Don't harm us. We'll give you cattle. We'll give you food, whatever it is, but don't harm us. And they would take whatever they wanted. They'd make deals, and then when they get hungry, they'd come back for more. Last week, it was 4 cows. This week, it's 8 cows. And don't argue with me, or I will eat you and your family, because I just ate my own brother, another giant, because giants were known to be cannibalistic in nature. Historically, legend, what do you call it? These are some of the legends that have come out of this, that because of the nature of these Nephilim, because that's where we get Nephilim from, they are the children of angels and human women. That's who Nephilim, that's who these giants. So they're born normal. They're born, but there's something that's switched off, that little mechanism that stops you from growing after you get in that 6-foot range for men. That mechanism wasn't turned off, and they kept growing. And some of these guys would grow as high as like 15, 20, 25 feet. These are not your normal people. These are not like Andre the Giant that's 7'5". That's short. 500 pounds. That's short. And they would have 6 digits and all kinds of stuff on each hand and on each toe, which makes them a little bit unique to the idea, like they're not human and they're not angel, but they're in between. And because those giants couldn't procreate because they're massive, they would often sodomize each other and beasts, and eat beasts alive. Like they'd catch a beast, eat them alive. And they had no problem killing each other with the sword. They had no problem eating each other once they killed each other. And they had no problem having crazy whatever with animals. No problem. And they would turn on people, and people would run for their lives because they would eat them as well. It's interesting, and this has no connection whatsoever. This is just how my mind thinks. So take this with a grain of salt. This is, I can't find any proof of this. But isn't it interesting? And I had a theory about this with regards to Cain and Abel, that one of the ways that Cain killed Abel was he bit him. Tradition says he hit him with an ox head or something, like a tool. Hit him, struck him out in the field, whatever. But I often thought, well, what if perhaps this is where cannibalism came in? As in, he murdered his brother, Cain, whether biting him, because we know that when there is a fist fight, and if it goes bad for a man will bite. He will bite. He will use whatever at his disposal. We know women, when they're in trouble, the most powerful weapon that she has is her teeth. You can tear skin, you can tear flesh. And I thought, the only reason why I thought that perhaps Abel was killed this way is because God said, where's your brother Abel? Where is he? Where is his body? And Cain says, who, like, am I my brother's keeper? And tradition is that he buried Abel in the ground, and then his blood cried out to God, which makes sense on the basic level. But isn't it interesting that when you talk about cannibalism, if you take the word Cain, and Abel, and you put those together, and you put ism, cannibalism, Cain-Ableism. And again, there's no tie. You look it up in Wikipedia, dictionaries, whatever. Cannibalism is it doesn't tie the two together. It doesn't do that. But I just find it interesting, out of the two words that you can mesh together, Cain and Abel, and you add ism, you got cannibalism. It's kind of weird. It's just, I would put that up on the shelf as coincidence. That's all I'm saying. Coincidence. But it's kind of weird, man, because cannibalism was running rampant in the land of Canaan, and we know in some of these remote islands, areas of the world, that cannibalism, the further away you move from God, the more this tends to happen. And it actually infected Israel as well, where they turned to cannibalism, because part of the worship is to sacrifice your firstborn and eat your firstborn as well, to Moloch, all the other gods as well. So Israel was not immune from this happening. God warned them that this can happen. Moses warned them and said, look, like, if you guys enter into this covenant with me and you worship me and you don't worship any of these gods that were before you, it's going to go well with you. You're going to live a long life. You're going to be prosperous on this land. But if you don't, all the curses that I mentioned, blastings, you got to ask yourself, what is blastings? What is pestilence? What is the sword? Because there's like I think four categories of how Israel would be punished. Blastings, pestilence, sword, and then famine, something like that. So when you starve, you start eating each other. Those are kind of the four categories. And coincidentally, this is also what happens in the latter days, in the end times, when Jacob's trouble begins. People are going to run out of food, resources, and stuff, and they're going to turn on each other. They're going to turn on each other's animals. If you have no food, you're going to be looking at your little kitty cat or your little puppy and be like, it's either him or the cat. Which one do you guys want? So those are tough times. That's Jacob's trouble. And I've talked about it. I've talked about what Jacob's trouble means and all this kind of stuff. And you'll still get post-tribbers that say, no, the church has to go through all this stuff. But if you think about the days of Noah, and you have these creatures that have been bred from angels and women, Jesus says it'll be like the days of Noah. Marrying and given in marriage. What does that mean? Well, in the days of Noah, the wives were given over to the angels. So in the days of Noah, that's what was happening. Angels marrying women. Women being given over in marriage to angels. Angels marrying women. Breeding with women. And it was against God's laws. God's universal laws. They weren't supposed to do that. And because of that wickedness, these angels are chained somewhere underground, don't know where. Some people say under Euphrates, some people say inside the bottomless pit somewhere. But Jude talks about them leaving their first state and being chained in darkness until their day of judgment. So this is before the flood. This is because of the flood that they get all chained up and everything. And their children die, which is the Nephilim, and their spirits are still roaming around the earth trying to find bodies that they can inhabit. Because Moses says, look, happened in the days of Noah, and it's going to happen after. So when's after? Well, after they get off the ark, it starts happening again. If you go into the table of nations, I always use the King James Bible for reference. But if you go into Genesis 10, this is after, I think this is just before the tower was created, the Tower of Babel. But if you go, let me see if I can bring this up here. I use ChatGPT for some of this research stuff. So if you go into ChatGPT, I said list the names and meanings of the Table of Nations, Genesis, KJV. So if you go to the Table of Nations, Genesis 10 outlines the descendants of Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These names are significant as they form the roots of various nations and peoples. Here's a list of the names and their potential meanings based on their roots in Hebrew and cultural significance. So the descendants of Japheth, Gomer means completed or finished. Magog, land of Gog, or expansion. That's kind of interesting. Magog means land of expansion, land of Gog, or expansion. Any nations come to mind that like to expand, like to expand their nation, like get more land? Is there any nations that you can think of today that have actually taken over other land or have suggested that they would like to take over land and make them part of their country recently? Any countries come to mind? Some of you might think, well, perhaps Russia does that. If you thought China, you'd be wrong, because China doesn't do that. They don't expand like that. They don't just take over. The only countries that do that kind of thing on a world scale would be England and the United States of America. Think of Donald Trump wanting to make Canada the 51st state. Think of Donald Trump wanting Greenland for himself. I just find it interesting that we have a nation called the United States of America that likes the idea of expanding for security. Just a thought. I just thought I'd throw that out there. We don't do that. Canada is not known for that. We don't go and conquer other nations and expand and take them over. We just don't. Meta, middle or measure. Javan means wine or effervescent. I don't know what that word means at all. Tubal, flow or confusion. Isn't this interesting? Tubal. Think Tubal Cain. He's the guy that helped create all these musical instruments. It's kind of funny that there's one guy that invents all these musical instruments and he's named after Cain, which kind of supports that crazy serpent seed theory. If you haven't heard that, I did a video about it, about the idea that Eve actually had 2 children at once, Cain and Abel, twins by 2 different fathers, Satan being one father, Adam being the other father. And Adam didn't know that Eve had another child inside her when she conceived of a second one. We know medically this is possible. We know if you've ever watched any of those, what's his name? Rivaldo, or who are these guys that always have these crazy TV shows where people freak out and smash people with chairs and all this stuff? Well, there's some episodes where they have a fight between, I'll come back here for a sec. They have a fight between a woman and a man, and they're trying to figure out who the father is. So she's like, I was here at this certain date, and he's like, I wasn't there at that certain date. I arrived home from the military or whatever a week later. And she's like, no, I've never been with another man or whatever. And then, Jerry Springer would reveal the guy that was there a week later. So they would procreate and she would get pregnant. And then a day later, when he left, another man came in onto her and got her pregnant as well within 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it is. So she had two babies in her womb from two different fathers. And we know scientifically this is possible. It has been happening. So the seed theory is the idea that when Adam and Eve partook of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and that there was some kind of foreshadowing that Eve actually mated with Satan himself and had a child named Cain. And then Adam went in onto her when they got kicked out, or just before they got kicked out, or just after. And she got pregnant as well by Adam. The only reason why that seed theory keeps popping up from time to time is because we only see that Adam went into Eve once. He knew his wife, and she gave birth to Cain and said, "This is of God." And then she had another baby, Abel. I don't think, because this was her first pregnancy, I don't think she was aware that there were two nations, two entities, two people, I should say, in her womb. How do we know this? Well, later we see Rebecca pregnant, and she's like, "Man, I got severe labor pains. I don't know what's going on. This is my first time having a child." And God said, "Well, it's because you have two nations inside you. You're pregnant with twins, Jacob and Esau, and they were jostling with each other." So imagine Eve never experiencing birth before. Something's going on in here. And I'm not saying I believe the seed theory. I'm just putting it on another shelf that says these are interesting thoughts. Because it is weird that as soon as Cain comes out, he murders Abel right away. Because I think Abel was going to have Jesus Christ come through him. Because that was what was prophesied to Eve. And then Cain slew him. And it's like, okay, I get all the inheritance now, everything, because it's just me. Just kind of funny, because then he goes out and starts building cities. And I would argue with you, not about the seed theory, but the idea that once they partook of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that they understood a lot of stuff. They were very smart. They're all smart already, but I just mean now they're shown the future, thousands of years into the future, and they see everything, and they got a pretty good memory and all this stuff. And then Adam and Eve get kicked out of the Garden of Eden because he didn't want them to take of the tree of life, because then they would be stuck in that state forever. So he kicks them out. First thing Cain does is he starts building cities. Like, this guy was smart. And then his children start creating instruments. Well, we know Satan was in charge of worship at one time. It just makes you think. Just makes you think. Some people are like, I can't even go there. I can't even go there. I can't entertain any of these thoughts, Shane. This is too crazy stuff. Well, I want you to know that these thoughts are out there. People have said this stuff. So if ever somebody comes up with this seed serpent theory, you now know what that is. That's because Cain was a murderer from the beginning. His father was a murderer. Who's his father? Satan. That's what Jesus said. So unless you think this is just a metaphor for bad people, that you just go around calling people, hey, Satan's your father, then you're faced to wrestle with the idea that, did Jesus hint at the idea that Satan came from Lucifer? It's weird, right? It's weird. 99% of scholars will not entertain that idea at all. And I agree. I'm on that side. I'm like, it's kind of weird. It's too weird for even the Black Swan to entertain that idea that Satan can procreate. It's too weird. But then he got cursed after. So maybe that was eliminated. The idea that he could do that he could procreate. Don't know. We just know one day in the future there's a son of perdition, which is the Antichrist, which the devil himself, we always think of it as possession. But perhaps could something go on that's very similar to what happened in the days of Noah, where angels come down, procreate? Not the devil himself, don't know. But it gets really, the more you dive into this, it gets really mysterious. Some of the things that are actually going on before the flood, the technology that they had. Like, if you talk about billions of people, like, they could be like we today. Like, they could have homes literally like we have homes. We don't know. They could have computers. Don't know. They could have all kinds of clothing, infrastructure, whatever, that is very similar to how we are today. Don't know. We just assume that they came from a cave and then they started building an ark and then that's it, kind of thing. We don't realize that these people were highly intelligent at building cities. Building cities, you have to have people populate a city for it to be a city. And wickedness all over the place. It didn't take very long. Took about, what are we looking at? Under 2,000 years for the whole world to get corrupt, somewhere in that range. As if you think about it, it didn't happen during Adam's watch. Like, obviously, they're progressively getting more wicked. But it happened in the generation of Noah. Noah, as we found out the other day, Noah lived to be 950 years. So 300 of those, I believe, were before the flood. So, or 600 years before the flood, I should say. He lived another 350 years after the flood, which is a long time when you think about it, to see all this stuff. And then later in Genesis 11, we see the Table of Nations. We see the Tower of Babel, I should say. All right, let's continue. Not this one. I want to go to Genesis 10. Let's just have a look here. This is the Table of Nations. So now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Just want to make sure you guys can see that. Yep. I think you could see it. Let me just repopulate that here for a second. Hope you guys don't mind this. This is kind of how I think. Like, I go through scripture, I wrestle through scripture, and I'm like, what does this mean? What does that mean? All this stuff. So if you go to, instead of having people say this is what it means, or this is what I think it means, or whatever, you can actually just go right to the source. So Genesis 10. Now, these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I believe these guys could be triplets. Don't know. Kind of feels like they could be. There are some Jewish legends that Shem is the oldest, then Ham, then Japheth. Fair. But it's kind of interesting that it just mentions Shem, Ham, and Japheth all at once. And unto them were the sons born after the flood, the sons of Japheth, Homer, and Magog, which we talked about, Madai, Javan, and Tubal, and Meshesh, and Tyrus. Tyrus. Who's Tyrus? Let's go back over to ChatGPT. So we got Tubal, confusion, we got Meshech, prolonged, and we got Tyrus, possibly desire or crushing. These are what these guys' names are in Genesis 10. Think about that. This is leading up to the Tower of Babel. So this is after the flood. So the descendants of Gomer were Ashkenaz. That's kind of interesting. That name keeps cropping up. Some people say that's where you get Nazi from, all this kind of stuff. But that would be the descendants of Gomer. A man is sprinkled or scattered fire. Ashkenaz. Isn't it interesting that Hitler executed 6 million Jews in ovens? And this guy, Ashkenaz, his name is a man is sprinkled or scattered fire. Weird, right? Riphath, which means crusher or spoken. Togarmah means bone breaker. Wow. Imagine these guys living in this time. And these guys are living for hundreds of years, don't forget. They're not living like you and I, 50, 60, 70 years. These are hundreds of years. And then we have the descendants of Javan. So we have Elisha, God of the firmament. Isn't that interesting that this guy's name is named after God of the firmament? Roof people. And there's a legend in what's it called? Not the Sanhedrin. What's it called? There's an ancient Jewish text. I forget what it's called, but it's like 93a or whatever, that talks about the Jews actually believe roof people, people from the north, are coming to attack Jerusalem one day in the future. And these people are coming from the firmament, not from the north, not from Russia, which is what we always think of. We go, oh yeah, Russia's a bad guy, blah, blah, blah. Well, the earliest Jewish manuscripts, they were always traditionally talking about the idea that these people can come from the firmament and attack Jerusalem, attack Israel. Isn't that weird? So his name is God of the firmament, or my God saves. And then you get Tarshish, which means contemplation or refined. Kittim, bruisers or beaters down. That's what this guy's name means, bruisers. Well, what do you know about bruisers? Well, they're satanic in nature. Why would you say that, Shane? Well, Satan was cursed to bruise his heel, and he will crush your head. That's Genesis, I think it's Genesis 3, somewhere in there. I think it's Genesis 3, where God is pronouncing a curse onto the devil, saying that you will bruise his heel, meaning the Messiah down the road, meaning crucifixion, piercing him like a lion. And if you know a lion, lions have 2 teeth. That's like nails. He's pierced like a lion, because Jews get all hung up on Isaiah 53. They get all crazy, and they're like, no way, it doesn't say pierced with a nail. It doesn't say that. And then all of a sudden you read it and you're like, pierced like a lion. Well, if you know, or if you've ever seen evidence of a lion killing an animal, there's 2 marks usually, because their teeth are like this. And there's 2 of them, the top 2 teeth, and they pierce. So they pierce the neck. There's 2 piercings. And that's how they kill their prey. They break their neck, or they choke them out, whatever. They can't breathe anymore, but they pierce them. Or if they bite someone's arm, if a lion bites you in the arm, chances are you're going to get pierced. They bite your hand could get pierced. They bite you in the leg, your legs will get pierced. So the devil pierces Christ at the cross by crucifixion via the Roman soldiers. So that's a bruiser of heels. And Jesus is a crusher, is a skull crusher, crushes authority that the devil has. So if we go back down, let's go back down. Let's go back over to this. So we got bruisers or beaters down. And then you got dodenim or rhodonim, which means leaders or rulers. These guys are like tyrants. Cush in Genesis 6:20 means black or dark. Mizraim, two lands in Egypt. Put or foot means bow or afflicted. Isn't it interesting that Antichrist shows up and he has a bow, but he doesn't have any arrows? It's kind of interesting. I have a theory on that. Canaan, lowland, subdued. The descendants of Cush, drunkard. Seba means drunkard. Isn't that interesting? You got to ask yourself, drunk with what? I would suggest to you that this person is drunk with worshiping deities from heaven, worshiping deities from the firmament. Remember, the firmament is everything above us, space, if you will, and then above the firmament is water, which is interesting, and below us is water as well. Don't know how far down, but we got water below us and we got water above, because I think it was in Genesis chapter 2, or day 2, I should say, the firmament was created and there were waters above and waters below, and the firmament was in the midst of the waters. A solid structure, which is, I believe, a space. Don't know how thick that structure is, how vast it is. It could go on far beyond our reasoning. Could go on for quite a ways. We don't know how thick the firmament is. We don't know. Could be interdimensional as well. Don't know. Then we see Havilah, which means circle or sand. Sabta, which means strike or terror. Rama means trembling or horse's mane. Sabteka means striking or extension. And the descendants of Rama, Sheba, oath or 7. That's kind of interesting. Dedan means lowland or leading forward. So other notable descendants of Cush, Nimrod, which means rebel or we will rebel. Descendants of Mizraim, Ludim, which means strife or born of Lud. Anamim, afflicted ones or fountain dwellers. That's interesting. Well, where would these fountain dwellers live? Well, quite possibly below the earth in the fountains. Interesting. They're fountain dwellers. I never saw that before. Lehabim, flames or burners. Naphtuhim, openings are open. Perhaps opening portals, don't know. Pathrusim, southern land or region of Pathros. Kashulim means fortress or lofty ones. Isn't that interesting? Again, going all the way up to the firmament. Katoram, like these people worship or have, a legend would have it, or historically legend, this is Jewish history, all this stuff, like all these people worship deities from the firmament. You can't get away from that. Caphotorum means crown or knob linked to Crete. It's kind of interesting as well. It's almost like, is that where Greece is in that area? Descendants of Canaan. Sidon means hunting or fishery. Hunting for what, you might ask? I would suggest hunting for men. Heth, terror or fearsome. Jebusite, trodden or threshing place. These are, remember, in Canaan, these are the nations that God was going to get rid of via Israel. So Jebusite, trodden or threshing place. And this is where the Jebusites actually inhabited Jerusalem. That's where David took over that place from the Jebusites. Amorites, one of Israel's foremost enemy, are called mountain dwellers. What mountain, you might ask? Well, again, I'm telling you, there is some crazy stuff going on with these names, that these guys are named after deities from heaven, angels. Girgashite, clay dweller. Isn't that interesting? The man was made from clay, and these Girgashites are called clay dwellers. Hivite means tent dweller. So you got clay dweller and tent dweller. And if you think of our body as clay, or if you think of our body as tent or a tabernacle, these people are named similar to that idea. Archites, fugitive or root. Sinite means thorny, thorn, clay worker. Arvadite, wanderer or restless. If you think about these spirits, or if you think about wandering stars, as mentioned in Jude, they lost their first estate. They're endlessly wandering. Some of them are chained up underneath. Others, like the Nephilim, were killed, and they're wandering the earth trying to see if they can inhabit a body. It's probably why they hang around graveyards. The Zemarite means singer or wool shearer. So singer, again, if you think about Lucifer being in charge of worship in heaven, you have a guy that's known as a singer. Hamathite, which means fortress or defender. So when you think about it, these guys built walls that reached to the heavens, like in their cities. They're fortified cities. Think of Jericho. Huge walls that chariots can actually ride on top of them. That's what these guys are named after. So now you got the descendants of Shem. Elam, meaning eternity, are hidden. Asher, a step or level plain. Arphaxad, I shall fail as the breast or healing. Lud, strive or contender. Aram, exalted or highland. That's kind of interesting. And I believe that's where Abraham came from, the descendant of Aram, I believe. The descendants of Arphaxad, Selah, sprout or send out. Eber, the region of beyond or to cross over. These are crossover people. It's kind of interesting, right? The descendants of Eber and Peleg, division, because the earth was divided in his day. Joktan, small, or he will be made little. Descendants of Joktan. Almodad, immeasurable, not measured. Cephaleth, extract or drawn out. Harzameth, probably butchering that name, village of death, court of death. Jera, which means new moon, moon or new moon. Just kind of interesting because, again, you got to think of these names from the perspective, like all of them, worshiping heaven, deities in heaven, worshiping angels. Hadoram, honor or exalted. Uzel, to depart or separate. Jikla, palm grove or palm tree. Obal, strip bare or bare mountain. Abimelech, my father's God, are the father sent from God. That's an interesting name. Sheba, oath or seven. Ophir, abundance or riches, Havilah, circle or sand, and Jobab, desert or howler. Interesting, right? Lots of stuff going on there. We're just kind of scratching the surface here. There's so much. So let's go to some questions, and then we're going to continue a little bit. But I think it was important to kind of give a little bit of a foundation of where these people come from, who they're named after. Imagine being a family or a tribe or a culture where as soon as your child is born, whether male or female, the first thing that you do is you name that person after one of the deities that you worship in heaven. So whatever district that you're under, that's the deity that you worship, because we know that they're all divvied up in the heavens to be rulers over certain districts. Michael, I believe, is in charge of the land of Canaan, that whole area, or the land of Israel today. I believe that's kind of his district. And obviously he's over all the angels, but it feels like there is principalities, powers, rulers of the air that are in charge of certain districts all over the planet. And back then, these districts caused people to worship them. And God winked at it for a time. What does that mean? Does it mean he approved of it? No, it means that what he did was he focused on Israel. He let all the nations do whatever they wanted. They can do whatever they wanted. But once Israel came onto the map, he's working with them and teaching them, look, I am making you a light to the nations. So you can't be like those people that worship all the angels in heaven. I don't want you to be like them, because that's what they do. They do this. They sacrifice their children, the humans, they sacrifice their children to these deities in heaven, Queen of Heaven, all this kind of stuff. That's the realm that Abraham came from. His father was a worshiper of many gods. And back then, you didn't want to tick off any of these gods because they would come down and kill you in some way. So these guys with their families would have different idols, worshiping this angel, this angel, this angel, this angel, and all this, because they didn't want to offend any god, because they know what happened before the flood, that these angels came down and had sex with women, and they're a little bit sensitive. Like, could this happen again? So then they built the tower as well to protect themselves from another flood. Most likely, my theory is hiding data in the tower, hiding all their books, their resources, everything, protecting themselves from what? They didn't want another flood to happen. And God told Noah, it doesn't mean that his descendants passed it on to anyone, but God said to Noah, I will never destroy the world again with a flood. Again, which is interesting, because then you start talking about the gap theory, where when we show up in Genesis 1, the world's already flooded. And then you got to ask yourself, why is there water? And why is the Holy Spirit over the water, over the surface of the waters of the earth? What's going on? Why is there water? Shouldn't there be nothing? Instead, there's chaos underneath. Like this place, it gives you the appearance that this place was destroyed. Now, personally, I don't know enough. I know enough to be dangerous, but I don't know enough to put a stake in it and say, yes, this is exactly what happened. The devil had nations and all kinds of stuff, and then that whole place got wiped out, and then and God flooded it, and then it's happening again, and God's going to flood it again. Don't know, but it's kind of interesting that God says that I will never flood it again. I just assumed that he would never flood it again because it's a one-time event. So if you have to tell people that you're not going to do this again, that could perhaps lead you to think that this happened before, or it could happen again in the future. So God says, I'm not going to do it this way. I'm not going to judge the earth this way anymore. I'm not going to do it again. We know, if you read the book of Jubilee and other books, Enoch, all the stuff, that there was a fear, the people that worship these deities, that they feared that the world was going to get flooded again. So they wanted to build a high tower that they could reach to heaven so that they could take over God's throne. And their goal was to build it so high that they can actually raid God's throne. They wanted to reach the firmament. And if you read it, man, there's some crazy stories. Like there's the story of the Tower of Babel. Again, this is legend as to how it was built, because nobody really knows. But when they were building it, they said that there were laws in place. Like it would take about 3 days to circumnavigate the top. That's how big this tower was. And it would take like a day to get up. So if you had bricks that you're baking in the ground and you're building this thing, it would take an entire day to get to the top of the tower as you're building it. So sometimes what would happen, again, this is just legend. I'm just throwing you out legend here, that these guys are working on the Tower of Babel, and the rule was, don't look down. Don't look down. If you see a guy falling as he's working, don't look down, ignore it. Because what would happen is people are working away and all of a sudden they'd fall. And they'd fall for a long time. That's how high this tower was. And they weren't to look. And they got mad because they were bringing these huge bricks up. And if they dropped a brick, they lost a day's wage because they had to start all over again from that brick, passing it person to person, level to level, getting it all the way up to the top. And if you dropped it, you're like, man, that took us all day to get that up there. Now we got to do it again. Now we're 2 days behind. And people would fall. Ah! And you're like, don't look, don't look. Ah! Another guy falls. That's how high these guys were, and they didn't have ropes. Again, if you go through this crazy stuff, like the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilee, the book of Giants, the book of Yasher, all these, I went through all of them, book of Adam, all this stuff. I went through all this stuff. And it's crazy, man. I'm telling you, your eyes just fall out of your head. You're like, what am I reading here? Crazy stuff. I think perhaps that could be why it's not in the canon, because the Jews are like, this is too much. This is, even for us, this is too much to handle all this kind of stuff going on. But if you imagine bringing it down to earth, where guys are working on this stuff and they have these crazy rules like don't look down when a guy falls, it's because I think your heart can get disheartened because you're like, I'm going to fall. I don't want to fall, because it's death right away. These guys are falling for a long ways. Anyways, crazy stuff, right? You guys, this is stuff that you don't learn in Sunday school, folks. Telling you, the Bible's amazing. The Bible's an amazing book, and I always get something out of it all the time. So let's see here. Shirley's got an answer or a question. For everyone who thinks CERN is the newest Tower of Babel, the whole idea, from my understanding and discernment and reading between the lies of lines, they're trying to punch through. Yeah, I have one eye on CERN because they took a Christmas break from December 21st and they open up on January 6th. Isn't that interesting? They open up, or as in they started their particle collider January 6th. So if you start diving into this stuff and you look, okay, well, what happened on January 6th? I would argue with you that perhaps these fires in California started around that time frame. You can say they started before, perhaps. But isn't it interesting that you fire up CERN, this atomic particle collider? I think they're up to no good. I think they're trying to smash a hole into another dimension. They're opening up other portals. Because every time they do that, things get interrupted here on Earth. And Zechariah talks about these 4 horns that try and interrupt God's plan, because God has a plan for Jacob, for Israel, and that is to gather all of Israel together. And he promised, he told Moses, tell him that I promised that I will gather them. I'm going to scatter them via these 4 horns in Zechariah 1, but one day in the future, I'm going to bring them back. I'm going to do it. It's going to be me, no one else, because no one else cares about you as much as me. But I'm going to bring them back. How? Through carpenters. What do you mean carpenters, Shane? What are you talking about, carpenters? You mean like builders? No, I'm talking about time shifters. People that shape time. Shaping time. Like, imagine time like a river that goes in one direction and it spews out in different directions away from God's purpose. God uses these 4 carpenters to bring this river back to fulfill God's purpose on time, on schedule. But these 4 horns are trying to spread the river out to delay the judgment of the devil himself. How do they do that? Well, they do that by erasing our history, repeating history, doing things over. And we're like, well, how did these pyramids get here? We have no idea. The Incas don't even know. They're like, yeah, this was here before we came. 100-ton plus stuff, rocks, stones. You can't help but think the giants built all this stuff. How did they get their knowledge? Well, probably from their daddy. Who's their daddy? Who the daddy? It's probably where that saying came from. They're angels. From where? From the firmament. Roof people. So these angels pass the knowledge on to these giants, and these giants pass the knowledge down to whoever as well, while they're wreaking havoc. And these angels teach the women, and the women teach their children. And some of these documents are left, like in stone, etched in stone, before the flood. After the flood, you get all these humans that are worshiping all these stones, looking at the etchings and going, man, if we don't do what these beings say, they could come down again and kill us and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, oh man, we need protection. So we got to start sacrificing our children and all this stuff in order to be protected from the roof people. Otherwise, they're going to come down and kill us. These wicked angels and all kinds of stuff. They've lost their first estate. So that's the environment that Abraham came from, including himself. And then God said, I need you to stop what you're doing, and I need you to go to another land. And Sarah's womb was barren because God didn't want Abraham to have children in that area, because they were all worshiping all these deities and all kinds of stuff. Didn't want that. And God was, I believe that God was speaking to several people. And only Abram responded. And because of that response, it was credited to him for righteousness, that he believed that God was going to make him blessed among all the nations. All the nations will be blessed because of him. All the stuff. It's all related to faith. Abraham didn't see the country. He was looking into the distant, into a country that he didn't get, that he didn't possess. What country is that? Well, I think it was heaven. And we know heaven eventually is going to come down on earth, but I'm just saying that Abraham wasn't necessarily looking at the dust going, yeah, I can't wait to have this. When he was with Lot, he says, I don't care. You pick. If you want this side of Jordan, pick it. If you want that side, pick it. Doesn't bother me because I'm looking for a heavenly kingdom, something in the future. Because he didn't get one lick of land during his time. The only thing that Abraham saw in the future was that his descendants were going to inherit that land. And that's what he was looking for that day in the future. And he believed. He believed he was going to have a son. He didn't even blink when God said it to him. When I say blink, I mean, when somebody says something, hey, would you mind going to the grocery store today to go get a bunch of things? And you're like, you want me to go to the grocery store? You blink a couple times, right? Abraham didn't blink. He just went, that's awesome. Wow. Thank you, God. And Abraham it was credited to him as righteous. And if you want to be a part of the seed of Abraham, you have to enter into the exact same faith as Abraham. What is that? Well, you have to believe like he did. 430 years before the covenant, before the law, I should say. He was not circumcised when he believed. He did not have the laws and the commandments. He didn't. He just believed. God told him something and he believed without seeing it. Who does that remind you of? Christians. We believe and we don't see. I don't see Jesus Christ right here in front of me. I don't hear his voice, but we are more blessed because we believe and we don't see than people that see and don't believe. But can you imagine that? Seeing and you don't believe what you see? I don't believe it with my own eyes. That is a slap in the face of God. And that's what people do. But we don't see. We don't feel. We don't go off of our emotions and get all gyrating and all this crazy stuff. Why? Because this is credited to us as well as righteousness. Because we hear the gospel, like my friend John says, John Foitier says, we hear the gospel, we understand the gospel, and we believe the gospel. Hub. That's credited to us for righteousness. We believe that Jesus Christ was born of a virgin, born of flesh, died on a cross. Physically, his heart stopped beating on the cross. We know this because a Roman soldier pierced him in the side to make sure he was dead, and blood and water came out, signifying perhaps that he had a heart attack, that he died of heart failure, like a heart attack of a broken heart. He was taken down from the cross, I believe by Nicodemus and then someone else, Josephus, and put him in a grave that was unused, brand new grave, very nice grave, and then buried him. And the Jewish leaders didn't want anyone to spread a rumor that his body was taken out, so they sealed it. They sealed it with basically a signature from Pilate, I believe it was Pilate, saying that, okay, you also have a watch as well, meaning you have guards around it. They're going to guard it for 3 days so that nobody can say that the disciples took the bodies. And then we know what happened. An angel came down. Roman soldiers fell as though dead, and then the rock was moved. And when Mary showed up, there was nobody in the graveyard. There was nobody in the grave. And Peter and John showed up as well, having a little sprint. John got there first, looked in, and then Peter walked right in and noticed the napkin at the head, and then also his covering, his blanket, whatever that they wrapped him in, folded up nicely on the bed, if you will. Kind of interesting, right? I don't know where I was going with all that. I don't know why I was saying that. Oh, believing the gospel. This is what makes us unique as Christians, and this is why we have a reward in heaven. Right now, there's basically, easiest way to explain this is there's two regions. There's higher places. That's where all the principalities, powers, rulers of the air are, and then there's heavenly places. That's where the church is. That's where Jesus Christ is. Jesus Christ's name is above all names, not only in this world, but in the world to come. Not only in this age, but in the ages to come, the church is to be blessed. We're eternal, meaning we are up there. We have seats right now in heavenly places above higher places. Higher places are where all these angels are hanging out. Heavenly places are up higher. That's where God's throne is. That's where we hang out. This is a blessing and this is a privilege. Yes, we don't see, but yet we believe. Paul even talks about that. He hints about that in Romans, I believe. We walk by faith, not by sight. Why? Because this mirrors Abraham. Abraham walked by faith, not by sight. It's a blessing, right? No, Wes Huff preached the word. No, I didn't. I'll have to check that out. You know, what's interesting, these people, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, and others are playing with fire. They're playing with fire. What do I mean? If you keep having Christians on your podcast talking about the Bible and about Jesus Christ, eventually you're going to come to a place where you're held accountable by what you hear, and you could get converted. So be careful. Be careful, because you could get converted one day having all these Christians hanging around you. It's kind of bizarre, right? When you think about it, that these secular left-wing people are moving into the right-wing sector, and then they're having Christians on their channel. So I find that interesting, and I think about Russell Brand, where I didn't really care too much from him for him. I was just like, just another podcaster. But then when he turned his life around because of Christ, I can see it in him. Like I don't doubt for a second that he's a Christian. I don't. So it's pretty cool. And that could happen to Joe Rogan if he's not careful. He could become a Christian. Can you imagine that? Joe Rogan. Crazy, right? Okay, so I don't want to go too long. This might end up being a part 2 or a part 3. Do you guys like this? Like, do you want to go on just a little bit more? Well, like, we didn't really get into giants yet. We're just we're building a little bit of foundation here. I'll go a little bit longer. I'll go for another 10 minutes or so. Okay? Because I want you guys to have a good morning and be able to have your breakfast, have your own devotion, all this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to read a little bit from some notes that I have about. Let's just go to, let's see here. So we're going to go into, let's go into, where is the best place to go here? Yeah, let's just go through some scripture verse that talk about giants. Okay? But I'll just read Matthew 24, what Jesus said. So 37:38, verse 37:38. But as in the days of Noah were, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And I think today we just go, oh yeah, that's just people being married and marrying and all this stuff. But I showed you that that's what was going on in Noah's day was angels were actually marrying women. So you kind of start getting a hint that perhaps this can happen again. So Jesus referenced the days of Noah in the context of end times prophecy, which connects the time to when giants existed. For as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So when you think about the coming of the Son of Man, you have to think about it in the context of in the days of Noah. So this leads up to the coming of the Son of Man. This leads up to the second coming. That's what Jesus is saying. He's not saying that it's a 24-hour period that he shows up on one day and that the days of Noah is a period of one day. No, it's leading up to the coming of Christ, arriving here on earth and reigning. So these are kind of like markers. When you see this, the generation that sees this stuff happening, Jesus is very near. When you see giants walking around, whether half machine, half human, half animal, whatever, walking around, you know that time is short when you see all this stuff going on. We're not there yet, but we're very close. I think we're very close to the beginning of the end. We're not at the end of the end. We're nearing the beginning of the end. So we read Genesis 6, but let's go to Numbers 13:32. Yeah, and I think there's rumors of people spotting the Sasquatch family, all these sightings, right? Like I think it started a couple years ago in Florida. Again, it's always around America. Isn't that weird? I find it weird because it kind of supports my theory that Noah's Ark was actually built in America. What, you blasphemer? Why would you say such a thing? Well, it took over a year. It took over a year for the Ark to get to the mountains of Ararat, which we know to be Turkey. So unless you're thinking that the Ark was built in Iran or Iraq, you have to ask yourself, with the whole world flooded up to 30 cubits above the highest mountain, you got to think there's currents going on. And if you're thinking in 1 year that Noah's Ark would only travel maybe 100 miles or 200 miles or whatever it is from Iran to Iraq, I think you're kidding yourself. Because it took over a year for it to land in the mountains of Ararat. So again, if we're talking about the idea, and there are other people talking about this. It's not just me. This isn't just my idea, but I thought about it, and then I started looking it up, and I'm like, oh, okay, this scientist kind of is thinking along the same lines as me, that perhaps the Ark could have been built in eastern United States, because I guess there's areas where there's gopher wood. And it's kind of native to America, which is interesting. It's not native. Gopher wood is not native to Israel. It's native to America, which is interesting. So if Noah has gopher wood and there's all these animals all around, because you got to understand also that at one time all the land was kind of connected together. And then if you think about why do we have so many weird temples and stuff that are built almost pre-flood in nature, some of the Cyclonian design, like these are massive things that are built, and scholars will say, oh, they're from angels. Angels are not angels, aliens built them. Christians would say, or scholars today would say, it could have been giants, could have been Nephilim. Nephilim could have built it, but there's a lot of bones in North America that are gigantic in nature, meaning they're giant bones, giant human bones. You can argue if they're human. Giant bones. Natives worshiped giants at one time because they didn't want to get eaten by these giants. This is all over the place in North America. Like, a lot of natives believed that there were giants that were roaming the land, and there were also beasts that were crazy, terrible beasts as well, that were genetically designed by man to be wicked, crazy, flesh eaters, terrible. Dinosaurs ring a bell? Do dinosaurs ring a bell? Because whenever you see any of these dinosaurs, they're massive. You got to ask yourself, how did they get here? If you believe in dinosaurs, if you believe in them, you got to ask yourself, how did they get here? I believe those dinosaurs are from before the flood. Obviously, they're not yesterday. Can't be a year ago, 100 years ago. But the interesting thing is these dinosaurs show up at the same time as these giant bones. They just hide the giant bones from us. And then they say all they found was dinosaur bones. And really, it's fragments. It's pieces here and there. And then they piece it all together. Crazy stuff. Crazy looking creatures that you can almost go all the way back to before the flood and say these creatures were designed by men that are wicked. All day long, this is all they're thinking about is violence and stuff. How can we create these creatures that when they're bred, they're half man, half beast? And then people worship these things because they're going to get killed if they don't. Centaurs, crazy man, half horse, half bull, half man, all this stuff going on. Giants, lizards, terrible lizards, all kinds of crazy stuff. North America seems to be a breeding ground for giants and terrible lizards. I live in the dinosaur capital of the world, Alberta. All kinds of findings of dinosaurs and stuff. It's crazy, right? And then what is North America known for now is worshiping Satan. Like, if you go to Hollywood, the higher up you go in the food chain, you worship Satan. And then they start sacrificing children and all kinds of crazy stuff. So you have a portal on the left side, LA, Los Angeles. You can't help but think they worship angels. And then you got a statue on the east side, Statue of Liberty, a light bearer with the chain broken at the foot of this male, female. We don't know if it's a male or a female. Most people just say it's a female, but the artist wanted to make it gender neutral when he created this thing, and they wanted to ship it to Egypt. Egypt didn't want the Statue of Liberty, so then they offered it to the United States of America, and they brought it to Manhattan Island, where we know that this is an area that is, there's so much corruption happening in the area of Manhattan and New York. You can talk about abortion came out of there, all kinds of crazy stuff. Again, abortion is just another way of sacrificing your children to idols, to demons, to demonic entities, demonic realms, because it's demonic to kill your children. Sorry, but not sorry. It is demonic. So you have a whole nation that is covered, basically begging for protection from deities, worshiping deities, because the more money you make, the more you want to worship these deities, signing contracts with your life. And don't think these deities aren't going to betray you. You think you got fame and wealth for generation to generation. That's not how it works. When you sign a contract with the devil, he can break that contract with you whenever he wants. If not, look at what's going on to LA. The rich and famous are there, and all their homes are being melted right now. That's the devil betraying you. You put your faith in the devil, he betrays you. There's drought right now. As Christians, we need to pray for rain for California. Even if they hate God, even if they spit at God, we need to pray for healing in that state. Because we know there's a lot of corruption going out of there. And it's interesting that all these Diddy files and cases and stuff, like a lot of these homes probably had actors that were part of the Diddy case. And isn't it interesting that now you have all these homes, hundreds of thousands of homes being burnt up? You're going to lose all these records from Diddy. And this guy, maybe he'll go to jail for the rest of his life, don't know. But any of the other people associated with him in Hollywood could get off scot-free because all the records are being burnt. You don't think insurance fraud is just going to come in here and try and clean up all this mess and all these celebrities get off scot-free? Well, God keeps record of all this stuff. If you abuse a child, it would be better for you to be hung, a millstone to be hung around your neck and cast into the river, cast into an ocean, cast into a lake, than to harm a child. So don't think you can hide records and burn them up and God doesn't know. I'm telling you, there's going to be a reckoning on all this stuff. You have to kind of think about this stuff and go, out of all the places in the world for Noah to build the ark, in some ways it kind of makes the most sense that it would be America because of all the corruption that's going on in America and all the satanic worship. Like you can argue Mexico as well. Man, they live for the dead. It's weird, man. It's just weird. Like they have festivals and celebrations to the dead. Like they have their relatives that they preserve on their porches and they leave them there for years. Some crazy stuff, man. Yeah, South America is crazy as well. So when I say North America, it may not necessarily be United States. It could be Mexico, it could be South America, somewhere. But you can't argue with the idea that this land was riddled with giants at one time. Riddled, chock full. So if we go to Numbers 13, let's read this. This is Moses talking about this stuff here. Look at this. And they brought up an evil report of all the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants of the world. What does that mean? Well, inhabitants thereof. That means they're cannibals. These giants eat people. And the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature, giants. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak. So who are these giants? These giants are the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. So what's going on here? Well, there is the Nephilim, and then their children are giants. Sons of Anak. Anak would be one of the sons of the Nephilim, and other sons. Meaning these giants weren't quite as terrible as the Nephilim were. The Nephilim was the first generation. They got their punishment. They killed each other, ate each other, had sex with each other, all this kind of crazy stuff. And then after them, giants came, which were the sons of Anak. That's who Israel had to deal with. They had to deal with the descendants of the Nephilim, which come of the giants. So these are the sons of Anak, which are the sons of the Nephilim. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. So these aren't guys that are like 8 feet, 9 feet tall. These are tall guys. These are giants. These are killas. Killas. Let's find another verse here. Let's go to Deuteronomy. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 2. Oh, hang on here. Let's see here. Let's go to Deuteronomy. Yeah, chapter 2, I think, is interesting. Okay, so let's go to chapter 2. This is Deuteronomy chapter 2. So you got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So this is basically Moses' law, the law of Moses. Moses is writing out everything so that Israel could be reminded of everything that God has done for them, and then also some of the curses that come along with the blessings. So he's giving a little bit of a history here. And basically we took our journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea, and the Lord spake unto me, and we compassed Mount Seir many days. And the Lord spake unto me, saying, Ye have compassed this mountain long enough. Turn you northward, and command thou the people, saying, Ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. Meddle not with them. Like don't make war with Esau. Don't do it, because there's a brotherly covenant in place already. Meddle not with them, for I will give you of their land, no, not so much as a foot breadth. So they're not to be given any of the land of Esau, Ammon, or Moab. That's not their land. Israel's land is in the land of Canaan, not to be from the land of Esau, because God gave that to Esau. You shall buy meat of them for money that you may eat, and you shall also buy water for them for money that you may drink. For the Lord thy God has blessed thee in all the works of thy hand. He knoweth by walking through this great wilderness these 40 years that the Lord thy God hath been with thee, and thou hast lacked nothing. When we passed by them, from our brethren, the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir, through the way of the plain of Elath, and from Ezingaber, and turned past by the way of the wilderness of Moab. And the Lord said unto me, Distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in their battle, for I will not give thee of their land for possession, because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for a possession. So you got to ask, who is Ar? Well, he goes on to explain. The Emims. You know Eminem, the rapper? It's not the same person. These are Emims, not Eminem like candy, but Emims. They dwelt there in times past, a people great and mighty and tall as the Anakims. These are descendants of the Nephilim, which also were counted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites called them Emims. The Horims also dwelt in Seir before time, but the children of Esau defeated them when they had destroyed them from before the land. So Esau and his, Jacob's brother, had to battle giants when they moved into the land of Edom. That's named after Esau. They had destroyed them from before them and dwelt in their stead. So they took the place of the giants, as Israel did unto the land of his possession, which the Lord gave unto them. So as Israel did for Canaan, this is what happened to Esau. Now rise up, get you over the brook, etc., etc. So if we go down, that the Lord spake to me, verse 18, thou art to pass over Ar, the coast of Moab, and when you come near them, don't distress them, nor meddle with them, for I will not give thee of the land of the children of Ammon any possession, because I have given it unto the children of Lot for a possession. Remember righteous Lot? That also was accounted a land of giants. This was known to be a land of giants. Giants dwelt there in old time, and the Ammonites called them Zamzumims. Interesting, right? A people great and many and tall as the Anakims. But the Lord destroyed them before them and succeeded them and dwelt in their stead. So destroyed these giants, or they fled, escaped. Some of them obviously escaped. Most of them destroyed. As he did to the children of Esau, which dwelt in Seir, and destroyed the Horims from before them, and they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead. So Esau had a battle with giants. Moab had a battle of giants. The Ammonites had a battle with giants as well. Crazy, right? Like, it's just that whole area, that whole region was chock full of giants, and they fled. They fled. So where did they flee to? Most likely Asia and Europe. And then from there, probably made boats and stuff and headed to North America as well. Got out of there. Got out of Dodge. That's probably where that saying "got out of Dodge" came from. Lots of stuff. We're just kind of scratching the surface here. But I wanted to do a video to let you know that when Israel was approaching the land of Canaan, when there was the fullness of the Amorites, the wickedness, they're basically almost approaching the times of the flood when it came to these inhabitants, these giants, these 31 kings. These guys were abusing people severely. So God used Israel to judge that nation, not because Israel was righteous, but because he used them to conquer that area, just like God used other nations to come in and conquer Israel later. It's not because they're better. That's just because that's how God uses nations to go after other nations. Crazy, right? So that's it for today's video. I hope you got something out of this. Hope you enjoyed this kind of Bible study. I got something out of it. Hope you did. If you have, make sure and subscribe to the channel, and make sure and leave a comment as well, and share the video. Watch it again. Go through some of these scriptures for yourself. And I'll see you guys in another video. Bye for now. You guys are still here? But you guys will go. This is a little bit of an encore presentation. One of the verses that I forgot to mention is Og. This is kind of interesting. Deuteronomy 3, verse 11. Turn this music down a little bit. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof. Think 15 to 18 feet. 4 cubits. 4 cubits, like 4 feet, 5 feet wide. That's how big this bed was. 9 cubits by 4 cubits. and the breadth of it after the cubit of a man. Joshua 12:4. And the coast of Og, king of Bashan, was of the remnant of the giants that dwelt at Ashtaroth and Edrei. Don't forget, King David also battled a giant. 1 Samuel 17:4. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits. So Og was 9 cubits. Goliath was 6 cubits, and people would say he's about 6 feet tall. 9 feet tall, just over 9 feet. David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. So David was able to slay him with a slingshot. Then later we see 2 Samuel 21:15-22. Moreover, the Philistines had yet war again with Israel, and David went down and his servants with him and fought against the Philistines. So his servants are his soldiers, his best men. And David waxed faint. David was about to pass out from fighting a giant. David waxed faint, and Ishbanab, which was of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose spear was 300 shekels of brass in weight, he being girded with a new sword, thought to have slain David. Like he was thinking that I can actually kill King David. This is a giant, almost killing King David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, secured him and smote the Philistine and killed him. And it came to pass after this that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob, and Sibbechai the Husharite slew Saph, which was of the sons of the giant. This is one of Goliath's sons. And there was yet a battle in Gath, where there was a man of great stature, and that had on every hand 6 fingers, and every foot 6 toes, 24 in number. He also was born to the giant, born to Goliath. And when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimei, brother of David, slew him. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath, and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. It's kind of interesting that these were 4, and it's kind of interesting that David picked up 5 smooth stones. So I wonder if he was going to go after Goliath, either his 4 brothers or his 4 sons. It's kind of interesting. It goes on and on. On and on. There's lots of stuff going on. So yeah, hope you guys got something out of that. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in another video. Bye for now.